A quick introduction. I'm Niklass Barkans. I'm the son of Martins Barkans, which is the founder of our company, which is Abavas Winery, the largest fruit and berry winery in our country, for sure. And I'll talk more in detail about the grape growing and the grape production methods that we use because I truly think that's quite an innovative process for the whole region, and there could be a real big potential in the very near future to actually do it as a proper business. So if I present like a broad overview of our viticulture and winemaking in our country, then I guess I can start that our country doesn't have a winemaking history at all. Like there's a I'm sure it's quite similar in the other Baltic countries, but the history that we have is maybe like people making a lot of fruit and berry wines in their homes in small quantities. Tina already mentioned it. It's usually quite sweet or maybe too alcoholic, and that's kind of the heritage that we had. But in grape growing, not too much. We've had in the 80s a few at least Latvian people that bred uh, varieties for potential for winemaking, but up until recently there hasn't been like a consistent year to year style from these varieties to present that yes, these can be definitely presented as real good quality wines. So our aim initially was to, well, my dad started the company with the aim of finding what would be the most suitable cultivars for our region, because there's no history. You can't like really ask your neighbor or your granddad for advice. You have to start on your own, um, and um, and seeing what sort of wines you can make from these cultivars if they survive, which is a big if. So yeah, achieving constant yield, so getting like predictable results somewhat, which is hard in agriculture, but you know it's quite important. And yeah, the aim is to make a grape wine in high enough quality to present, to not be ashamed to present it in the best restaurants of our country, and I think we've actually achieved it quite recently, which is quite nice. So our project duration is, as we started it in 2010 when we planted our vineyard, and you know it's still an ongoing process. So we're still working with that. So initially we got a rural support service funding in 50,000 euros. I think funding is still available for young farmers. I think it's a little less than that. Where we managed to get we bought a tractor and got like vineyard posts and some of the first few plants that we planted with that. I think it was like a 1 hectare. We planted like 40 different varieties, so it was quite experimental. But the rest of it has been private funding ongoing onwards, because well, the grapes are still a niche experiment in our whole Abaus business. As mostly we make wine from fruits and berries. I think the concept is quite similar as David explained. But yeah, grape wines are still kind of a niche experiment that we're working with. So when it comes to viticulture, I've, I've I've studied winemaking and viticulture in the UK. I've had a bachelor's degree in oenology and viticulture, so I'm more practiced and more experienced in winemaking. But also, we if you don't grow grapes properly, then you don't have anything to make wine out of. So it's important to get the viticulture right, and it all depends on the varieties that we use. So we've found out that a local variety like Zilga can be very uh, with very good potential for the future and for good wines. And we also experimented with hybrid varieties like Rondo and Solaris, which some people may know. I think those are also good varieties for wine, but they're more trickier to grow in the winter because they're less frost resistant. Because I think anyone that lives in near this region knows that a minus 30 degrees can be a reality in the winter. So at that temperature, some varieties don't really survive too well if they're not covered by dirt. But whereas local varieties like Zilga and some others they can survive this temperature quite easily. They don't need winter cover. So that's where the pruning comes in place. Pruning is the main method on how you control your yield, because you can also spray nutrients, and site selection is very important if it's on a southern slope, if it has like enough sun exposure. But pruning really is, if you would count for the largest percent of variance that would affect your yield numbers, then pruning is definitely the way. So it's very, very important to get your pruning method right for your specific cultivar. And for a variety like Zilga, which is very frost resistant, we've tried out with cordon pruning, which is the one in the corner here, which is where you just cut off these new you make new spurs every year, and you don't cut anything from the trunk or the main arm, but you cut off these new spurs every year. And it's quite easy to manage, and it's quite easy to explain people who don't really have enough experience in agriculture or plant management how to do it. So it's actually a big bonus if it's easy to manage. It's easy to manage. You don't have to spend a lot more resources to do it. So for Zilg, we found out that this actually works quite well. But the problem with varieties like Solaris or Rondo, which can make fantastic wines, they're more prone to winter damage. So we've tried quite a few things like Guillot method, where you cut off a new arm every year, which is potentially better against root trunk diseases, which can be a big problem in a wet climate like Latvia has. But the problem is that over winter, if a big frost minus 30 comes, then everything that's not covered, then it will mostly die. Maybe something at the trunk will survive. So that's why we use a winter cover. Over winter, we drive a tractor with a disc through the vineyard, and we cover the base with the dirt to protect at least the base level, because some buds are always survive at the base level. So that's why we've also experimented with the Chablis method, which is pruning quite low to the ground, and then in the winter time you can cover more with this grape, with this burial method. So theoretically you can protect a little bit better against potential winter frost. Because winter frost is a real issue. For quite a few years, we decided not to bury anymore because the climate is thankfully getting warmer, which is great for us. But last, I think, yes, it was last year, we got a massive frost, I think minus 26 or 27 in March, which at that point, grape wine loses its frost resistance, and most of the plants were just dead. Well, some little buds survived, but there was no harvest whatsoever. So covering is really important. So we're resuming to do that. But the tricky thing is that once you cover with dirt, it can be tricky to uncover them, because plants and grass like to grow in those places, and yeah, it can be also quite tricky. It's labor intensive, so it's obviously more expensive. So those would be kind of my broad overview of the key viticultural things that we've learned. winemaking. I'm more kind of practiced and experienced in the winemaking as I'm working as a winemaker myself. Um, but yeah, in the Western world, it's quite modern and quite common to hear to use this kind of natural wine process to let the wine do itself and not control much of it. I think you can make a really good wine in this method, but not not where we are. I strongly believe that. I'm quite open to anyone exceeding my expectations. But I think if you're talking about grape wine, I think it's very important to control as much as you can to guide it to the best possible outcome. Because the grapes that we usually have, they're quite unripe. They have high acidity, probably not enough sugar. Well, maybe this year was a very good exception to that, but quite commonly they're, yes, high in acidity, low pH, and low sugar. So if you're trying to make red wine and it has like potential sugar or 8 to 9%, then it's kind of a wine cider. You need to chaptalize a bit to increase the alcohol percentage if you're making it a red wine as a red wine style. Because alcohol also gives you a mouthfeel, the volume, which is what the consumer also expects from red wine. Whereas also for white wine, white wines usually have high enough acidity, but if your acidity comes in above 10 grams per liter, sometimes 15 grams per liter, but that's just not going to be drinkable. So you need to really work with deacidification, what I do quite a bit with calcium carbonate to reduce the acidity in juice, because at the end of the day, the wine needs to be drinkable, and if you just leave it as it is, then you're not gonna have as good a result as you could have by intervening quite a lot. So the starting stage is quite a bit important. Also, for white wine, as I said, the grapes are very unripe, so it's quite important to do like cold maceration on the skins. What we do quite often is to extract more the aromatics and put aromatic and flavor precursors out from the skins, which really affects in positive manner the wine quality. And deacidification is also quite important for malolactic conversion. Because if you're making red wine, it's also possible to not care about the malolactic conversion, but sometimes your pH, your acidity is too high for the bacteria even to start working. So you need to deacidify even to allow for bacteria to work. So yeah, it's also quite important. And obviously a lot of fining, because you're gonna have a lot of green characteristics and some a little bit of unpleasant bitterness and maybe potential fermentation of flavors. So you need to have like the right tools and have the mind open for possibility for a lot of intervention to kind of adjust and fine and tune the wine to the best possible outcome. Because as I complete, because I'm repeating constantly, I strongly believe that you can't make a good wine in this region for now, at least, unless you intervene quite heavily. So with the challenges we face, I think it's mostly with the constant yields. If we probably would have a more efficient method on frost protection, maybe using like a plastic cover, which I've seen in Quebec and places like that, they use instead of ground cover. Obviously, it's quite labor intensive to put it on, but maybe it's cheaper if you account for the cost in like 5-year times. I think that could allow us to protect the plants from frost damage and maybe get a better consistent yield. Zilga can be quite good for consistency, which is nice. For Solaris and especially Rondo, it can be quite difficult because if they get frosted, it really affects dramatically their yield. Yeah, our vineyard management is not very cost effective because we have a lot of varieties and in like 3.5 hectares. If we would have like 3.5 hectares of one variety, which is quite common in the wine world to, have like maybe hundreds of hectares of one variety, then you have one pruning method and one method on how to do all things. But if you have like three or four pruning methods and like 5 different varieties, which all need a bit different treatment, then yeah, it gets a bit hectic. And yeah, as David I think said also before, that the public perception is can be an issue. Although this is a grape wine, there's still a perception that what everything that we make here, is it even okay? And there's a big self-criticism in Latvian community for the local producers that we can't really make good stuff, but it's trying to prove them wrong. That's the big challenge. And also lowering the cost per bottle, because it's quite expensive. It's at least 330 euros per bottle. So yeah, that would come in with the vineyard management issue. And briefly, yeah, what we will do different. As I said before, planting probably a lot more of one variety, like Zilga or Rondo or Solaris. But Zilga could probably work quite well. Maybe choose a south-facing side. That could help really a lot, I think, for better yields, and probably investing in better winter covering methods. I think that's a place where we can improve. So the things we can look forward to: the winter is getting warmer, thankfully, and the summer is getting better. So it's better for the viticulture. I think Zilga has a really unused potential as a good growing grape, and I think we've really exceeded a lot of people's expectations with some of the wine we made with Zilga. So I think that's a big potential there, and achieving more international acknowledgement. I think this year we got a Decanter Bronze Award for our red Rondo wine, which I believe is the first Decanter award in the whole Baltic region history. So I think we've proven that you can make fantastic and great quality wine in this region, but you just need to have a know-how and willingness to do so. So thank you all. I hope you heard quite a few interesting new things today. So let me know if you have any questions.